Today we have Karim Ntambi joining us from the U.S. He's the National Unity Platform U.S.A. team leader. We have Kyomugasho Miriam, Director AFRIC, and we are also pleased and very glad to have former leader of the opposition and also former Member of Parliament, Kasese District, Winnie, Kizza. We have Ambassador Henry Mayega, Deputy Head of Mission, United Arab Emirates. Very, very pleased to have you, ladies and gentlemen. Also joining us is Albert Bakasara in the US. Today we look at unsolved murders, and as we can see, it is exactly 5 years since the Kasese massacre unfolded in the restive pocket of the Rwenzori sub-region. That was on 27th November 2016, at the peak of a flare-up of violence. The army surrounded the palace of Musinga Charles Mumbere, resulting in the death of more than 100 royal guards, servants, and children. 18th November, just a couple of weeks ago, marked 1 year since the November riots in Kampala that left at least 54 people dead, hundreds injured, and personal and public property destroyed. Those years later, we still have very many unanswered questions. We have very many stories to tell. People still are telling stories of they have been waiting for justice and nothing has happened. I would love to begin with Winnie Kizza, the former leader of opposition, who was there during that time when all these killings happened. She and other opposition leaders did petition the ICC, which has since, said it has not shown interest. It just picked up and said, okay, we have seen, we're going to carry out the investigations, and that's it. The president came forward and promised that the government would compensate the victims, justice would prevail, but we still have unanswered questions. Winnie Kizza, you have the floor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, colleagues, for bringing up this conversation. Indeed, it's heartbreaking. It's unbelievable that a government in its true sense can mercilessly murder people, can mercilessly succumb people to dehumanizing activities and torture. Like you've mentioned, Lynn, 5 years ago, exactly 5 years, because the acts that happened in Rwenzori were on the 26th and 27th of November. Unfortunately, 26th happens to be my birthday. So it was unfortunate that I was trying to celebrate my birthday and unthinkable happened to my own people, the people that I represent. The people who committed the atrocities are known: officers of government, officers in uniform, men and women. The one who was commanding the killing was then Brigadier Peter Elweru, who was later promoted to Major General. Now is a Lieutenant General in the army, promotion after promotion. And some of us do believe that instead of holding him accountable for the murders, he's being promoted, kind of thanking him for a job well done. Again, like you have said, their wives who were left widows, children were left orphans, homes shattered, children's dreams have been shattered. A lot of economic activities are now at a standstill because the would-be heads of the families were either killed or arrested. 230 people were arrested after killing over 150, by the way, women, men, and children. And the killing was indiscriminate. It was a killing that was not explainable. So to us in the Rwenzoris, we thought it was a targeted killing against our people because they did not support the president in the election. Out of the 6 members of parliament, all of them became FDC. The district chairman with 90% of his castle were members of the opposition. President Museveni lost Kasese district completely. You can't joke with Museveni and go away with it. That is how our people were subjected to that cruelty, to that torture, and to that inhuman suffering that is now happening to the many people. For the last 5 years, we have been demanding for accountability. We have been demanding for justice, but we seem to be speaking to people who don't want to listen. Some of us thought possibly we would get redress from the ICC, knowing that if a sitting president commits errors, he cannot be taken to the courts of the land. That's what our constitution provides. It gives him a lot of immunity. So we thought, let's go to the ICC, where Uganda is a party, and we thought we would get answers there. All that the ICC said was yes, we realized there were issues committed, there were violations committed, but they didn't tantamount for those that are catered for in the Rome Statute. And therefore, the only thing we can say is that there was murder. Yes, if you believe there was murder, who murdered? And who should then hold them accountable? If the one who is supposed to hold the people accountable is the one who ordered the murder, so what do you have for the people who have lost their dear ones? And therefore, what is it that you are holding other people for, the ones who have been in jail unheard for the last 5 years? So it is still a situation that is traumatizing. It's a situation that presents the people of Rwenzori with lost opportunities. The children have had to leave school prematurely. Others have gotten pregnant. Others have gotten weddings at an early age. And now the situation was even made worse by the coronavirus, that even when it is affecting many people across the globe, but these who had peculiar situations, their situation became worse. And so we saw the same happening, like you are saying, on the 18th of November, 2020, where many people were killed in Kampala. And for me, I still believe that it's because the Kampala people also did not show support to President Museveni. When you go to the killings in the Massacre, we have not also seen anybody reprimanded for it. We only saw now 2 members of the opposition, members of parliament, being arrested and accused of having participated in the killing of people and aided and abetting the criminality that happened in Massacre. But I will also be quick to note that Massacre region did not vote for President Museveni. So some of us do believe that the democracy that we have in our country is far-fetched. The democracy that we think should be guiding people to having leaders who should be talking about development and how to bring unity amongst the population is now becoming the reason why many people are facing injustice, why many people are dying. And I don't know whether our leaders do consider what happened in the past, that all these injustices for which they went to the bush are coming back in even a more serious way than they were in the past. And therefore, I am glad that we are having this conversation and that all of us can see how to continue advocating for justice and accountability from the perpetrators. I want to thank you, Lynn.
Right. Thank you very much, Winnie, Kizza, Honorable, for giving us a clear picture of what things look like since 2016, following the unrest, following the unfortunate incidents that happened on your birthday, sadly. Now, still with you, Honorable Winnie, after the 5 years, I mean, today, this year we mark 1 year also after the Kampala killings. That was 2020.
20.
What do you have to say? Yes, so what do you have to say about these? Give us a picture so far. You have been at the fore of human rights fight. You have been at the fore of making our government accountable, especially in terms of human rights abuses and the like. With all these in our faces, what do you have to say?
Lynn, I will have to say that I think Uganda is at crossroads. We expected a lot of maybe support. When I talk about support, I don't say people should come out and maybe kill and do what. We thought many people would condemn the killings. We thought other nations would come up and say, hey, Uganda, you are violating international protocols. Because when you go into an election, you literally say, let people decide the way they want to decide. That is a dictate in democracy, that people will choose the way they want to choose. But now when you look at the killings of November 2020, you would see that these were targeting particular supporters of a candidate. Whoever was coming out to support Bobi Wine was a target. And we have continuously asked the government, if you think you don't want elections to happen normally, to be free and fair, why for heaven's sake do you still want to call for elections? We shall continue engaging our government, and we continue to use every space available to call for accountability. We continue to ask all those who believe in the fundamental human rights to come up and speak. Yes, some have spoken, but we believe it's not enough. And you know, Museveni has gotten used to that people will speak for just maybe like a month and it will end there. He will continue intimidating the others who would otherwise have spoken. I can tell you people like Nicholas Opio were heavily intimidated. Many of the civil society actors who wanted to speak, their organizations were closed. Up to now, there is still animosity, tensions are still high for those who want to advocate for justice and ensuring that human rights are respected. Human rights are given a chance. It's not about to live. Museveni is not about to ensure that Ugandans have freedom. It's not about to admit to the wrongs that he commit. So we shall use every available space. That is what we shall do next. So I want to thank you for organizing this, because this gives us yet another opportunity of letting the world know that we cannot remain silent amidst injustice. And the world should know that any injustice from whichever part of the world should be condemned. It becomes injustice to the whole globe. Justice in Uganda is justice to everyone, irrespective of what others believe. And we know that those who believe in democracy really think that having elections is a true way of saying, yes, we are a democratic state. But now to some of us who have gone through violent elections, where elections are not free and fair, we know that having elections per se is not the only way through which we can say we are a democratic state. And I can tell those who possibly want to listen that remaining silent in the face of all these injustices is the reason why many other countries are now resorting to coups. Let's not assume that it is happening in our neighboring countries and that it cannot happen to Uganda. When people are pushed to the wall, they are bound to do unthinkable atrocities. And therefore, we shall continue to use every available space. I would call upon all other colleagues, all other comrades in the struggle. We need to unite and ensure that we speak one voice. The only problem we have is that we speak in a disjointed manner. We are not united. And those possibly who would have otherwise come to our rescue fail to understand which voice they should listen to. But we see that our government is not about to comply in fulfillment of the international protocols on human and people's rights. They will continuously rob people of their fundamental rights, but it's our duty as citizens to ensure that we demand for accountability. And I know someday something will happen and our people will be free.
Thank you very much, Honorable Winnie. I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Henry Mayega. We have actually from Honorable Winnie, she's painted quite a very clear picture of what things look like since 2016 when all this massacre happened, and also the 2020 November riots that, we lost over 50 people, according to a formal report. We also know that other reports might have picked, a bigger number. Honorable, I beg your pardon, Ambassador Henry Mayega, people years later are still saying we have not received justice. The president on both occasions did come forward and say we're going to compensate the families and we are going to arrest those who are, culpable. He really came forward and was very stern about what happened. Though we keep asking what happened to the president's promise, and if all this keeps happening, where are we headed as a country? Ambassador.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I'm audible enough. Am I?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, I don't want to start these arguments in the middle because, for instance, I will start with Kasese. The argument should be begun right from the point when there were issues in Kasese, and that starts with the Rwenzururu movement that even the Obote government first in its first government in the 60s, and also in the early 1980s. But I don't want to dwell so much on that. At the same time, I don't want to jump into the middle because we have to appreciate where these things began. The Rwenzururu movement has been something probably least written about, but eventually it came to the forefront of the politics of that part of the country, and the rest is probably history. But and then during the government of President Yoweri Museveni, these things began to bubble up again. And when they did, of course, there was mobilization amongst Kasese and using the institution itself of the kingdom, and people were mobilized, of course, armed, all these kinds of things. And then there was that actually insecurity in that part of the world, where 4 policemen, at least as far as I remember, and as far as the records show, 4 policemen and 2 soldiers of the UPDF got killed in the process by the Royal Guards. And these were armed people. Forget about using pangas. They were shot dead. And therefore, in the scheme of things, if anybody thought that the state would just fold its arms and then wait until probably the situation gets worse to respond to that kind of situation, then in my view, that wouldn't be called a state, which doesn't respond to cases of insecurity. Because the mobilization in Kasese by the institution of the kingdom was thorough, people were armed, they began attacking security forces, and probably unknown to many people in our country is that there was this movement in that part of the country to create what is called Yira Republic. If people have not heard about that one before. Yira Republic, taking slices of land, not only in Uganda, but also part of the DRC. And therefore, when the government came up and began to respond to these things, what happens? What happened was that, of course, the side of the kingdom in Kasese, of course, responded by firing back. And in the process, the state came in to quell whatever the situation it was in Kasese. And in the process, of course, a number of people got killed. But let's look at the genesis. Where did this thing, because we can talk about the 50 people who got killed. Probably some of them were not armed, but quite a number of them were actually armed. And therefore, the state was actually responding to an issue of insecurity in that country. And I'm not aware of a country or a state or a government that waits for the situation to get worse than what it was to respond and then bring back the situation to normalcy. So in my view, the state responded to the issue of insecurity in Kasese. There were armed people, and it's public knowledge that people were trying to mobilize to create what is called Ira Republic, which was taking parts of Uganda and also parts of the DRC. And the rest is history. Fortunately, the state of course, has responded to what was happening in Kasese. Of course, the king of the Bakonjo was through the court system, and I want to refer to that as part of the justice that we're discussing this afternoon. Court issued orders, and he has been in Kampala for a very long time. And the rest is, I think, is going to be managed through the court system as well, if he's to go back to Kasese and enjoy his free movement within his kingdom. And so that was the genesis of this problem in Kasese. And the army had to come in. If it hadn't, probably the situation would have gotten worse. And so when we are talking about accountability and justice, we should look at the genesis of this problem. Where did it start? How did it start? What were the objectives of the organizers of whatever was happening in Kasese? The objective of the organizers of that insecurity in Kasese was purposely to create a state called Ira Republic. Some people, of course, will deny this, but fortunately, the biggest consumer of intelligence information in our country is the president. So we may assume that we know so much of what was transpiring in Kasese. Yes, fine, we may know tips and bits of this, but the fact of the matter still remains that the biggest consumer of intelligence information in the country is the president, and that is President Yoweri Museveni. Yeah, so that gives him a unique position in the country in order for us to enjoy either the peace or actually fail to enjoy the peace in the country. And so when they respond to these kinds of insecurities in the country, they are doing it in accordance with the constitution so that the whole country can be peaceful. And therefore, I just want to say, as I conclude about Kasese, so that I can speak about the riotous situation in Kampala, I don't call them demonstrations because these were riots. But as far as Kasese was concerned, one has to look back right from the early 1980s when there was that movement called the Rwenzururu movement, because it was again an armed rebellion. The Obote government at that time tried to respond. And of course, the rest is history. Probably we can discuss that much later. Now, when it comes to the riots in Kampala, of course, they became spontaneous. And the promoters of them, it was very interesting because money was exchanging hands through mobile money and all these kinds of things. There was, for instance, a pickup which was impounded in Kireka, which was full of tires. It was full of petrol, and people had plans of burning down petrol stations in the city and other actually towns of the country. So that pickup was impounded. Tires had been loaded to it, and people had petrol with them. The intention was to burn petrol stations. But of course, the mayhem had spread in quite a number of places in Kampala. And that mayhem took the shape of extorting money from pedestrians that were walking the streets. It took the type of indiscipline, and again, in a riotous fashion, undressing women dressed or clad in yellow because they were assumed to be members of the National Resistance Movement Party. And there was looting, people were erecting illegal roadblocks. And so all these things, if they are skipped by members of the opposition in terms of discussion, and they don't mention these things out, I think it would be dishonest with the highest level. It's actually intellectual dishonesty. Because the fact of the matter is that the situation had gotten riotous, and so security, which again consumes a lot of intelligence, had to respond to this kind of situation. And therefore, the They arrested quite a number of people. Of course, in the melee, quite a number of people got shot by stray bullets. That was unfortunate. And I think the state has been doing something about it. I understand, for instance, that some of these families have actually been given money, although there wasn't a lot of fanfare that the opposition in the country probably would have loved to see, that actually people are being assisted, but the government has gone ahead to compensate some of these people. And therefore, the state again was responding to a riotous situation, and rightly so, in accordance with the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. And so when we are talking about these things, we don't have to be oblivious of the fact that there is no vacuum in our country. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that there is a government, and that government has an obligation. And should I probably call it the highest obligation? The highest obligation, for instance, of the President of the Republic of Uganda is to make sure that people are safe, the country is peaceful, and whoever causes problems, either in a way that is peaceful, if it is peaceful demonstration, that's okay. But if people are touching roads, if people are raping women, if people are undressing women clad in yellow, if people are actually looting and erecting illegal roadblocks, then when the state responds to those kinds of situations, they are rightfully doing so. And exactly that was done by the security forces, and the rest is history, because the riotous situation was actually quelled when the security forces upped the game for purposes of ensuring that the country remains peaceful, the country remains stable, and the country is minus insecurity. So when we are talking about accountability and the issues of justice, we have to start the arguments right from the genesis of these problems. Where did these problems begin? How were they managed? And where are we? Of course, I can understand that some people, for instance, may not be really 100% convinced that the government has done much in as far as accountability is concerned. But accountability was done because, in as far as I'm concerned, the insecurities were stopped. That is part of the accountability. This is, of course, a matter of conjunction with some others who may want to look at these matters as if nothing has been done. Part of the reason why we can actually able to speak freely about these things shows that the country is stable, the country is peaceful, the security situation in the country is very strong, and it will continue to be so. So in the meantime, I just wanted to give those arguments, basically to see where these these situations began, because in my view, it doesn't make sense. If we begin to talk about what happened, where either in Kasese or the riotous situation, which had begun actually to spread outside Kampala, in the rest of the towns of the country, and the security forces came in again to stop those kinds of riotous situations. So in my view, accountability probably may not be done up to 100%, but in my view, I think 80% of the accountability has been done, 80% of the justice has been delivered, because the riotous situation was put out. Those who had in their minds to create the Hero Republic in the Kasese and parts of the DRC, I think have been told in no uncertain terms that the country is one and it will remain so. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Ambassador Henry Mayega. Let me first make something clear. From the reports that we have as media, on November 27th, the joint force of the police and military raided the palace of the Rwenzururu Kingdom. The offensive led to the death of more than 100 people, most of them Rwenzururu Kingdom loyalists, and the arrest of more than 200 others, including the king. But also, might I add, that it included at least 15 children. Now, if you go to the Kampala riots, a number of vendors, a number of business people who are not part of the riots were equally, killed or hurt in a way. Question is, why should the army, why should security forces continue, exacerbating whatever riot is going on, whatever disagreements are going on, whatever issues are on by attacking civilians? The problem is when it they encroach on civilians. And then instead of prosecuting the perpetrators, who are the security forces, it is the citizens who are being prosecuted and hunted down. Also, Ambassador, we have been getting reports that people have not received justice, nor have they received compensation. There was a lady on NTV recently who said she was actually pregnant. She got a bullet, lodged in her back, in her spine, I beg your pardon. She was helped somehow. She managed to get money. They pulled out the bullet. She gave birth, but she's still she has never received compensation, and she's still in a lot of pain. That is one of them. There's another lady who is equally, her and her sister were also equally affected. People are still saying there has not been compensation, there has not been accountability. The reports that have come forward are even nowhere to make sense of the situations that happened. I would want to quickly get to others, but I don't know if Honorable Winnie is still here with us.
Yes, I am.
The ambassador mentions that the government and security forces were quelling an uprising that has been going on since the 80s, according to the ambassador, allegedly that was coming up with Yira Republic. You have been the member of parliament, Kasese, woman member of parliament, Kasese district, and also former member of parliament, Kasese district, also former leader of opposition. But you have been there, you have been on ground. Is this true, Yira Republic? Do people know about it, or are we just hearing about it?
I don't know whether the ambassador has even ever been to Kasese, because President Museveni himself has been there on several occasions. He himself is the one who went in 2009 to preside over a function that was recognizing the Rwenzururu Kingdom Cultural Institution under the leadership of Mumbere. Then if there are reports of the Yira Republic organized by the kingdom, then I would say President Museveni is the originator, because he himself presided over a function that was recognizing King Wesley Charles Mumbere as the king of the Bakonzo. And I don't know if he knew that he was recognizing a rebel as a consumer of intelligence information, given what the ambassador is talking about. As far as I know, it was a traditional cultural institution that was attacked. The people who were killed were servants at the palace. They were royal guards, and others, by the way, were killed in the markets. So if you go to the market and you start killing people indiscriminately and you call them perpetrators of a Yira Republic, there has never been a Yira Republic. That is in the Museveni's words and possibly his own intelligence, to create a situation that will enable them to go and cause mayhem. I'm now beginning to also realize that anybody who President Museveni becomes a rebel in a sense of a rebel. So we may not have all the latitude to decide the way we want. To me, as far as I know, the issue of a Yira Republic has never occurred. I can say the time when the people of Rwenzori sub-region talked about maybe we should create a separate government from the one of Uganda was at a time when the then government of the whites, that was before independence, when the Bakonzo said, I think the independence government does not like us. When they were asking for recognition in Toro Kingdom, the Bakonzo wanted to be recognized in Toro Kingdom as a separate tribe, not as Batoro. So the Toro Kingdom rejected. When the Toro Kingdom rejected, I'm just giving him part of the history. You know, people just jump on issues without knowing. When the Toro Kingdom rejected to recognize the Bakonza as a tribe, the Bakonza and the Bamba as tribes within the kingdom, they said, I think it's high time we asserted ourselves and asked the kingdom to recognize us. Now, the colonial government then supported Toro Kingdom to muzzle the Bakonzo people. That is the genesis of the Rwenzururu movement. Now, the elders who were there marched out of the Toro Rukurato and declared an independent state, I will say that. Because now that is what came about. When Toro rejected the Bakonzo as a tribe and just wanted them to keep calling themselves Batoro, and the colonial government did not want to support the Bakonzo's agitation for justice and recognition, the Bakonzo said, I think we are in a state that does not recognize us. If we are not fighting with the kingdom, and we are now being left alone by a government that is supposed to take care of us, I think we better think about ourselves and behave in a different manner so that we know that it is a state fighting with another state. But all that was struggles of history which ended. And I can tell you that even when people think Amini was a bad man, he's the only one who understood what the Bakonzo wanted. And by the time he created, he decided that the Bakonzo and Vamba have a separate district. That is how the Vamba got Ibundebudio district and the Bakonzo getting the Kasese district, and everything has been normal. The assertions that there was a creation of a Yira state are assertions that appeared after the people of Kasese had refused to vote for President Museveni. So President Museveni started saying these people want to create their own state. I can attest to that, but because I've participated in elections, if there was anything to do with the Yira state, I would be in the know. I'm one of the leaders in the area. But there has never been anything, at least maybe after now, the declaration of the movement, the Rwenzururu movement, and when the Rwenzururu kingdom was formally instituted by the Isaiah Muchiranias, an issue to do with the Yira state has remained a political issue among those who think that anybody who is against President Museveni maybe wants to be in a different state. And then when the ambassador talks about the issues in Congo, said, you know, the Congolese and the Ugandans, I mean, for heaven's sake, we are Ugandans. We wouldn't be managing what is happening in Congo. No way you can tell us that the Congolese and the Ugandans are agitating to have a separate state. If they are thinking of having their separate state, that is their matter. Meanwhile, to us, we believed in a cultural institution which is known by law, which was commissioned by the head of state, and we believed him. We thought he was doing it for the good of our people, so that they enjoy their cultural freedoms just like other people in the world are doing. He had commissioned so many cultural institutions and having them recognized under Article 246 of the Constitution, and we thought he was being fair. In the elections of the cultural institution, supported President Museveni. He never called them Yira members. He never rejected their support. He actually gave them even financial support to go around campaigning for him. And I think now this time around, because they did not support him, that is the only mistake they committed for not supporting President Museveni. But in 2011, when they all supported him with all their institutions, President Museveni never complained. Mumbere, in fact, became a darling. So until when he did not show up to support him, that is when he became now an agitator of the Yira Republic. So, Ambassador, check your records clear. There was an error committed. When you say justice has been given, when people are in jails, they have never been listened to. Their cases have only appeared for mention. They are still in jail. In fact, if their people listen to you, they will call you a sadist. You can't kill my father, you kill my mother, you kill my brothers, and then you say, no, that was accountability. You only cease to be human. Okay. Because there are people who are suffering. People's dreams have been shattered. And I also possibly would like in the same way to respond to the thick and thin of the elections in 2020, and I saw what happened around Kampala. When the ambassador talks about these people staging roadblocks on the way and undressing people, and then it causes the security to just shoot people indiscriminately, even in markets, including those who were vending food, you need a lot of explanation to tell people that a food vendor was undressing people. You need a lot of explanation to tell people that those who were shot from shops, the parents who were shot with the children going to get vehicles were undressing others. And by the way, if these were staged roadblocks, it means the people would be known and were in a specific place. Why then couldn't the security go for those who had staged roadblocks? It's the same thing that we have asked the government of President Museveni. The palace was enclosed. For sure, it is in the center of town, just like Rubiri is in Kampala here. For you to tell people that there is a training of rebels happening in the Rubiri, in the city center, it is in the center of Kasese town. And for someone to just come up, jump, and you say, you know, they were mobilizing and creating a lot of insecurity. The people of Kasese were not complaining. There was no insecurity whatsoever. Actually, it's government that created insecurity by killing people everywhere. It created insecurity in Kampala by killing people everywhere. So, Your Excellency, I just address Your Excellency for the purpose of the title that you hold. But really, if the victims had your voice, if the families had your voice, I don't know what they would have to say, because personally, as a human being, I feel you are a sadist.
Can I respond?
Ambassador,
it's going to become a two-way. If
No,
she
no,
accuses
no,
me and I
Ambassador.
don't respond, if she accuses me and I don't respond, then accountability and justice will not be done.
Ambassador, I'm going to hold on for a bit. We have other people. I want them to,
Right.
give. You can respond.
I'll respond
later.
when the opportunity comes again.
Absolutely. Thank you. We have Karim Ntambi, the National Unity Platform U.S.A team leader. He's also been in the campaign, protests, lobbying for sanctions against the NRM government on over injustices, of course, that we have seen. Karim, if you can hear me, you have the floor today, right now, sorry. A report of an internal government investigations into the November riots has revealed that 39 out of the 54, or 72% of people shot dead were hit by stray bullets. That is one. Two, it has been widely reported that National Unity Platform people were the perpetrators of these riots, were the instigators of these riots, were the genesis of these riots, and it has been said by a number of people, especially from the government, and they keep pointing fingers at National Unity Platform for these riots that happened in 2020 November. Sadly, we lost people, and also sadly, people are still nursing injuries years later. Karim, over to you. What do you have to say about the role National Unity Platform has played in these November riots? Also, about the fact that people who were hit, the 72% of people shot dead were actually hit by stray bullets. You guys were allegedly the mobilizers. Karim, are you there?
Yes, I don't know whether I could be heard very well. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go on.
Okay, thank you so much, Lynn. Before we get into 2020, I wanted us to go back to 2016, and it is quite unfortunate when you hear the ambassador trivialize what happened in Kasese and the way he laughs at it, scoffing at 150 people being killed, and he even calls it a matter of it was a constitutional attack. It's quite unfortunate. 150 people were killed. They have never received justice, and he keeps talking about compensating a few of those. I don't know whether there is a how we quantify compensating people who have lost their lives. Because if that money is there, we can just pay the government, we can fundraise and pay the government to live and compensate them and live. 150 people is not a joke. Those are families, those are people in communities that, you know, ran businesses, that had family members that were just massacred. And for the ambassador to, so we have never received justice for Kasese. And the person who was at the forefront of commanding this was later moved to Somalia to command, to be part of the AMISOM command, to hide him from being part of human rights violations. And this is a tactic that this government has always been playing. They kill people in Uganda, and then they would hide the commanders in Somalia, which is quite unfortunate, so that they are not held accountable. Now, let us go to 2020. For the first time in our country, we saw a presidential candidate campaigning wearing a helmet and a flat jacket. When the ambassador talks about roadblocks, these roadblocks were created countrywide by security forces. The National Unity Platform candidate, Honorable Robert Chagulanyi, was stopped at every stop. In some cases, he would have to sleep in the car. He wouldn't even be allowed to sleep in hotel premises, private hotel premises. He would be, you know, cut off. So for the ambassador to come here and say that the National Unity Platform members were raping women and the security forces had to intervene, raping is known by the UPDF. You remember in 2003, pictures that showed what was happening in Gulu, where UPDF soldiers were raping women and shaving their pubic hair. Everybody remembers that. So it is quite disingenuous for this ambassador to say that the National Unity Platform were a victim of their own circumstances. It is really, really unbelievable. More than 150 people died that day, although the official record shows numbers in way 50. We still have people who have disappeared during the campaign. We have people who have been tortured and mutilated during the campaign. And even after their campaign, so many people were rounded up, held in Communicado. Some of them were held in military barracks. For the ambassador to come here and says each and everything that was done was in accordance to the constitution, where the UPDF can attack its own citizens without parliamentary approval, and you call that constitutional. You are not only a sadist, but you're a propagandist. And this is alarming for you as an ambassador to come here and convince millions of Ugandans that Museveni is the sole consumer of intelligence, and he knew that there were petrol bombs, there were cars filled with tires. Did you make arrests of those people? Is there any case in court where somebody was being arraigned for driving a car full of tires? Is there any case? Can you cite examples that so and so is being held for having a petrol bomb? Nothing. You saw how they are rounded up. National Unity Platform campaign in Kalangala, 150 people, and they put them in jail. The candidate was also arrested for some time. These are responses to people who are demanding justice. These are responses for people who wanted to be part of the constitutional process of the election. So for him to say that Museveni is a sole consumer of intelligence, is the benevolent, is the all-knowing, he knows what is happening in Kasese and he knows what is happening everywhere, and is the sole custodian of the constitution, because whenever the attacks are happening, it is Museveni who knows and Museveni who decides. He's the legislature, he's the judiciary, and he's the executive at the same time. He can't be that. He can't be the Trinity of Uganda. It's really sad. And to go back to what Honorable Winnie Kizza was talking about, we hoped that our international development partners would come and hold Museveni accountable. Unfortunately for the US, where I live here, we have been having a long military to military partnership, which is not based on mutual interest and mutual respect, where Museveni's army, as an extension of the US, doing their work in Somalia and wherever they go, is not held accountable. I would cite an example. After the killings in Kasese, you know what happened? Elweru was moved to Somalia. And after he was moved in Somalia, a few months later, Elweru was hailed for doing such a wonderful work in Somalia. He has never been held accountable. So the same thing happened last year in November. In November, after the killing of more than 100 people in Kampala, guess what? The people that Museveni had said had come back from Somalia to restore peace were shipped back to Somalia. And in January, we had fake news circulating that the Ugandan military forces in Mogadishu had killed 189 Al-Shabaab militants. I don't know where the motivation came for them to put out such fake news. And it took us and friends of Uganda and friends of justice who pushed back onto this number on where this attack was done. And we ended up finding out, but there was no such an attack. It was a PR propaganda machine to cover up what was happening in Kampala, so that Museveni is hailed as somebody who is holding fort in the Great Lakes and in the Horn of Africa region. So this is the type of government that has been running. It is running on propaganda. It is running on mischiefs. It is running on all manner of unconstitutionalism and violation of human rights. So it's unfortunate that you, Mr. Ambassador, you would come here as a sadist, scoffing and trivializing the killing, the torture, mutilation, and illegal detention of Ugandans during the 2021 elections. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you very much, Karim, for that. Though you avoided my question of saying that the National Unity Platform was highly considered the perpetrators of the 2020 November riots. You didn't answer me there. But I see most of you are pointing fingers at the ambassador. May I make correction here that he is here as a person, a representative of government. He's not necessarily saying what the government is saying. He's representing what is on ground and what is the government saying. So pointing fingers, we all have a role to play. I think we just need to understand. I want to speak to you, Miriam. Last week, a group of human rights defenders under their umbrella body dubbed Network of Public Interest Lawyers released a statement indicating that they would sue the government if nothing is done for the victims of the November riots by end of next month, which is actually this month, by end of December. Also, in relation to the Kasese, over 100 deaths that were registered and the over 15 children that died, you have been, you are an activist, a human rights defender. Do you think the government is ignoring what is happening and maybe has not paid enough attention, or maybe is riding on alleged intelligence and they're acting upon it to save the over millions, the millions of other Ugandans that may be, at risk if they let all this, go unchecked?
Thank you, Lynn, and the previous speakers. I think there is something in the NRM DNA which averts, which is like against justice, which doesn't respect the civilians, which thinks that the military is the answer for everything, which thinks that Museveni is the answer to every question. If you go back to NRM history, anyway, we don't even know what they did in Ruwero, for crying out loud. We see scars, but how did people die? Ever since NRM took over power, why can't we have truth and reconciliation commissions, and we discover all these injustices that are said to have been committed by NRA, UPDF for all its tenure, all the time that it has been in government? There are Mukura massacres. There are so many massacre incidents in northern Uganda during the Konyi War where civilians lost lives under shady circumstances. The Kasese massacre was the most recent, and there was no justification for whatever went on. We know UPDF is one of the most highly trained army in the region. So you can't say that people armed with pangas and machetes, spears could overwhelm a force, even if it was a police force of you and a few military officers of UPDF. So what was the justification of the scorched earth policy that we saw happening in Kasese? Just 1 minute you go bomb the palace, killing everybody. You know that's a resident. If the government had intelligence enough, like the ambassador said, they knew that was a residence that hosted a lot of people, from the elderly to the mothers, to the children, to the workers, kitchen maids, to cleaners. Why would you set such an establishment on fire, killing indiscriminately? How do you justify that? Which part of the Ugandan constitution gives that power to the UPDF? This is UPDF mandated to defend every citizen of Uganda against the enemies, which are actually assumed to be foreign enemies. But the same army, instead of guarding Ugandans, is the one killing Ugandans. We saw the BBC documentary highlighting how actually explicitly showing the world what Uganda police did, shooting people on Kampala streets during the November riots. Okay, there was a riot, granted, but how did the security forces respond? We saw indiscriminate shooting, people shooting in air, people shooting everywhere. All the social media was showing all that. How do you justify that? Even the president came out and said, there is nothing like a stray bullet in the hand of a trained military officer. So why, and he promised to prosecute whoever was indiscriminately shooting or mishandling their firepower at that moment. But nothing has been done. That's a lip service. That's a lip service that and empty political statements that NRM keeps giving the moment they commit such atrocities. And ever since the Luwero War, ever since the 1980, we have never held NRA UPDF accountable for their atrocities, extrajudicial killings, everything. And I think by this time they take it for granted that they have the overall power, even above the constitution, above the law, to do whatever they feel they wish on every Ugandan, as long as Museveni wishes that those people don't deserve to live, or whatever, I don't know what basis they do such a stuff. I want to respond slightly to the ambassador who said that the president is the sole consumer of power, intelligence. Yes, I will give you an example of the guy who was shot in Kampala. He was called Benz. I don't know the right name, or it was a nickname. Museveni said that person was shot accidentally. He had given an order not to kill, and then they killed. So who shot? Who committed that accident? Should we say that the president should be held responsible for the murder of that person, since he was the one who gave the order? And that's like, that thing was dismissed like nothing happened. But if you go back to the US 2020 Human Rights Report, there are details of the atrocities that were especially committed during the elections and before the elections that were politically motivated. UPDF acting like NRM military militia, maybe, executing whoever doesn't support the government. And that's the basis why they even put sanctions on some UPDF officers. But for Ugandans, the sanctions put by foreigners are not enough for us. For us, we want justice. We want a UPDF army which feeds on taxpayers' money, which works under the mandate in the constitution, which is supposed to serve Ugandans, be held accountable by the same Ugandans it's supposed to serve. But will we get to that under NRM government? It has never happened, and I don't think it will happen today. Are we seeing a dictator in power? Are we serving a democratic government or a dictatorship? How can we get justice from those in power, the people with guns? They feel like now they are above the law. I don't know where they get that mandate. And Mr. Ambassador, that's very unconstitutional unless we have a new constitution, which I've not seen. So how do we get justice from the extrajudicial killings committed by security officers? How do you assure people that Uganda, you are safe when you see a Ugandan soldier? I mean, are we supposed to fear the Ugandan soldiers like we feared in the previous regimes? How do we hold accountable the president? Those are my concerns, Ms. Lynn.
All right, thank you, Miriam, for that. I keep asking myself, so who do we hold accountable? Who do we run to for accountability? Because everyone has something to say and everyone has nothing to say that can help the situation. But well, Albert Bakasara, how are you today? Thank you for joining us. You've heard so far from the ambassador, Kizza, you've heard from Miriam and Karim over the Kasese massacre, over the November 2020 riots that, saw people die and lose their lives. You have been in the diaspora for a while. You look at these things all the time. We are having conversations. You keep saying that whatever inhumane acts are going on in the country, keep telling us, I rather keep, they keep you away from your country. You're embarrassed for your country, by your country. Albert, here we are. Years later, we still have no accountability. We still have no justice. We still have people still languishing in their homes. They have gone penniless. They have not received compensation. There are still many questions that you and I, have, but we might never get answers to. We have people here pointing fingers at each other and saying, you're doing this, you're not doing that. How long are we going to have these conversations? And how long are we going to wait for justice to prevail?
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, fellow panelists. As I've always said on these, when we engage in these conversations, they are useful. But let me go right to your question. How long are we supposed to do this? We have to keep doing it. We don't have a choice. Who do we hold accountable? Ourselves. I don't mean to pile on Ambassador Mayega's submission, and I know you had tried to defend him, but he is here as the government of a representative of the government of Uganda, and he made really astounding statements in his submission. He said that all the killing that was done was in accordance to the Constitution and was done for the greater good of safeguarding peace and stability in the region. So I would say, and I don't want to term them as attacks, but I would say that the people who have countered that submission needed to, because you really cannot say that. Where was the constitutional mandate to literally obliterate a residence? Because everyone is here talking about Kasese, the palace of King Mumbere. This is not a palace in the terms of a palace, and even the comparison to Ruviri is really off. I know the place. It's literally a residential compound in the middle of the city. So the palace does not even explain what happened. It's a residential compound, no more than maybe a football field. There's no forest around it. It's not isolated. There's I think there was a second school behind it. So they're not even trees. There's not even they're not even shrubs that a person can hide in. It's in the open. It had a fence around it. So for UPDF to come and just decide to blow the whole thing up, that cannot be constitutional. It cannot even be humanity. It cannot be how we do business. And then the ambassador comes and says, oh, they were responding to the threat of the Ira kingdom. And I appreciate Honorable Kizza to explaining the genesis and then the whole Toro Kingdom, and how at one point the Bakonzo and Bamba wanted to break away from Toro Kingdom, where I come from, and that all that was accurate. Beyond that, I don't remember a time, even when we were growing up, even these days, where somebody has said, "Oh no, we want to create an independent republic that incorporates Kasese and some parts of DRC." It's not there. Do people share cultural ties? Of course. So do the Batoro. We have Batoro in Congo. Some of the royal family members are in Congo. But it doesn't mean that somehow, if there's some insecurity or some insurgencies in Toro, that somehow we want to create a new republic that incorporates the Batoro in Toro proper and in Uganda, and combining those with the ones in DRC. It doesn't work that way. What happened in 2016 in Kasese was a tragedy. It really was a massacre of innocent civilians, and people should be held accountable. There's no going about it. We can make excuses. The government can give us its line, through whether through Ambassador Mayega or through someone else. They can keep talking. But people needed to be held accountable, and that did not happen. Will it happen? I don't know. As Miriam just said, we've never even understood what happened in the wars in the bush, or what happens in Somalia and stuff, unless you are really, really good and really doing good research, like I see my brother Karim is doing. You won't even understand what is happening in this administration. But anyway, to answer, to add on what has been the contributions of many of these panelists, I would say, from humanity and perspective, and really meaning, how do we value ourselves? Do we value the lives of Ugandans? That's really at the core of what we're talking about. And maybe the broader implications of what the actions of our government in Uganda are, internationally and domestically. So do we value our lives? No, we do not. Because honestly, there are riots, and they will be there. When people are unhappy, they can burn a tire on the street. But to equate burning of a tire on the street to just a pickup, as we saw in that documentary, a pickup with soldiers just shooting everybody, aiming at civilians some in their flats. Those are not even on the streets. They're in their homes. But you could see soldiers aiming at them, shooting at them. That cannot be justified. And I don't know if the message of the ambassador come off a little bit maybe unconcerned, cavalier, and maybe he'll get a chance to address that. But we're not attacking him as a man. We're really attacking his line of reasoning here, that this was constitutional and the state was responding to a threat. No, the state cannot respond to a threat by indiscriminately shooting civilians on the streets. That's unacceptable. And the more excuses we make, the more we prolong this misery for ourselves and our people. Because we are one, we're connected. So what are the broader implications? The broader implications are, and I don't agree with Karim that foreign governments and our partners in development have not done much. They have. And what else that you have, and some of the things that they have not done, or that people don't know that they've done, because some of these are sealed indictments. And you don't have privilege to see them. I don't have privilege to see them, but we know they do exist. And some of these people, when change or when somebody travels, they'll be picked up. Because you cannot do this, and the international community just sits by idly and looks at you and says, yeah, you can get promoted all you want in Uganda. There's a possibility that your day will come one time. But anyway, so the impact on domestically, the international is that some of our foreign leaders cannot travel, our military leaders cannot interact with the leaders of other development partners, and that really cuts off that collaboration. And also, you don't get a lot of support. There's also the business aspect where investments kind of dry out. There's also turning off your diaspora community, where I saw the reports where the remittances have declined. Yes, we're in COVID, but some other countries actually their remittances went up, but in Uganda's case went down. So you can attribute all these things add up to an environment where our country gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Domestically, what are the implications? Well, we're getting older and a new generation is coming up. This is what they see and this is what they will know. And this is what they will live down the line to their offsprings. What is this? Is it really shooting people indiscriminately? Treating everybody who doesn't support you as an enemy of the state? Is this the country that we hand over to the next generation and they hand over to the next generation? All in the sake of peace? Well, I mean, I know, I believe Mr. Ambassador Mayega is in Dubai. I'm in Washington, D.C. Many people who can attest to that and say that, oh, no, we're peaceful, have a raging war. But people are on tension. Condone the acts that were attributed to the ADF a few weeks ago. We cannot, okay? But isn't there a constitutional process where the president actually goes to parliament and tables something? He has the NRM has the majority of MPs in parliament. Why not pass whatever collaboration that on a strategic level has been agreed upon between the UPDF and the army of Congo? Why not have that memorandum of understanding come, pass through a constitutional process? If you have to summon them in the middle of the night, summon them. I saw them, the First Lady summoning them to Kololo. Why not the President summon them to Kololo and say, hey, we have ADF, this is the evidence we have. I would like your powers to go and do this and attack this group where they are. I don't mind that. But when you go in there, oh, no, let's go shoot, and then questions will be asked there later. And then by the time you know it, you have another $10 billion US fine from the next DRC government in Congo, saying, oh, no, Uganda did this, looted our country, killed our people. Now we need to be paid. We cannot keep doing this. We cannot keep doing this. And like I said, you aptly said, I'm far away. Yeah, I've been living in the diaspora, but at some point I'm going to come to Uganda. But I would like to see these engagements continue. We keep talking, but I would like also to hear that the government is listening. The dismissive attitude and statements like the ones that the ambassador made are not helpful. They're not helpful. The people who are dying belong to somebody. These are somebody's parents, these are somebody's siblings, and those seeds are being sown. Tomorrow, they would want revenge. We cannot live in this revenge cycle and somehow think that we're creating a nation for our children. We're not. We might be having the powers today. Tomorrow, we might not. These people, and Winnie, Honorable Winnie Kizza did talk about the Toro conflicts with Bakonzo. That's exactly what he used to do. That's exactly what they used to do. They never listened. It was the Toro Kingdom or the separatists from. There was no talking. There was no. Everything was always settled by a fight. Every now and then it would be a fight. Every now and then it would be a fight, and people would be killed. And because of that, there's the mistrust that continue for generations and generations. There's hatredness that continue unnecessarily. And I have a feeling that that's what we're doing in Uganda. Yes, the people who are being shot on the streets, or whether it's in the palace in Kasese or on the streets of Kampala, they're not going to be forgotten by their loved ones. And at any opportunity where there's an opportunity to revenge, they will. They will revenge for the killings of their brothers and their sisters and their husbands. They will. So we who are privileged now to live in whatever peace that the ambassador is talking about might not really comprehend that. Might not really comprehend that. We have the comfort, but as we have known the history of these things and the history of our own country, it doesn't take long for the tide to turn. It really does not. It does not. And I would hope that we actually, from now going forward, we start having these conversations with the feeling or with the sympathies, empathy, being empathetic on some of these things that happened without just dismissing them and talking them in some cavalier attitude and saying, oh, it happened, we're constitutional, no state cannot do that. Yeah, there are states actually that cannot do that. January 6th here, people came and attacked the Congress of the U.S. No, the army did not come and blow up everybody who was there standing. No, they actually even broke and even went inside the thing and almost touched it. But it's better to replace a building than to just shoot everybody because they've attacked Congress. So there are countries that cannot do it. And thank you, Lynn.
Thank you very much, Albert, for that. Ambassador Henry Mayega, you have your reactions. I'm sure they're talking to you about your submissions, but I understand where they're coming from. However, I would want us to know that many women were rendered widows with orphans. Others, the children died. People lost their properties. People have never recovered since those incidences. Honorable Winnie Kizza has mentioned that we keep violating international protocols. Miriam has said that the NRM DNA is against justice and human rights. Everybody's pointing fingers. Ambassador, while you react to all that has been said, please, can you also tell us why do we continuously violate international protocols? How then who are we going to run to for accountability? I mean, we are not holding the government account. We are holding it accountable, but nothing is coming forward. The reports being given to us are not helping. The compensation that they keep promising is not coming through. Everybody is seemingly tired of the injustices being meted on citizens, especially by security forces. Are we heading back into a period where we're going to be scared for our lives? Ambassador.
Yes, I will pick it up from where you ended, that everybody in the country is asking questions. I don't believe so, because in the recent elections, again, President Yoweri Museveni won, which speaks volumes about his popularity in the country. If he wasn't popular, then the story would have been different. Probably in these last elections, he would have lost them. And the voters spoke loud and clear. Now, having said that, I think I was very clear when I spoke about the responsibility of the president. I did say he was the sole consumer of intelligence information. I said he is the biggest consumer of intelligence information in the country. There is absolutely nobody who I know of that consumes as much volumes of intelligence information as the president. And that happens in the rest of the countries, even, where my brother Albert lives, in the US, I'm sure the president there consumes or he entertains lots of reports about what's happening, not only in the US, but also since the Americans want always to refer to themselves as international policemen in the rest of the globe. So, and as far as Uganda is concerned, I think let's be clear, the biggest consumer of intelligence information is the president himself, President Yoweri himself. No other can consume as much intelligence reports as the president. And therefore, on the basis of that, he reacts to situations in the country. And if cases of insecurity rise up, or just like they have always risen, in terms of riots, in terms of armed rebellions, the last count I made of rebel groups that had been formed in Uganda was 17, and that is about 4 years ago. 17 rebel groups. And if all of them were permitted the space in the country to cause as much mayhem as they would have wanted, then that country, I think, would have been on fire. But on the basis of intelligence reports and on the basis of the security system that we have in the country, there is still a country that everybody should be boasting about called Uganda. One country called Uganda. The other day, I used to hear the FDC president and, of course, his supporters, Kizza message referring to one country, that one country that he was always speaking about, has been kept as one unit as a result of the security consciousness of the president that we have, because of his credible security credentials. We have remained as one country. Now, there was a comment that I'm a sadist. And let me give the full story, for instance, because I left out quite a number of things. When it comes to the Kasese problem, the Kasese saga, the Kasese rebellion that was actually being fomented in that part of the country. Here is a situation where the security people of the kingdom of the Bakonzo killed, as I said before, 4 policemen and 2 UPDF officers. And they ran to the palace, the so-called palace in Kasese. And the government requested the Mumbere and his establishment to hand over these killers, what actually the people who had killed the policemen and the UPDF officers. And there was no response. And so they kept pleading with the palace authorities that, look, you have to hand over, because it was very clear that these people were hiding in the palace. And they had even dug underchairs and they were armed to the teeth. And so then the rest is history. And of course, there was an exchange of fire. And of course, they got overwhelmed by the government security forces. If there are, and I was very clear right from the beginning of this conversation, if there are any civilians that were caught up in the melee or in the crossfire, either in Kasese or Kampala, that was unfortunate. And therefore, that is the responsibility of the government to make sure that these people are compensated. And I was saying, I also hinted on it, that the method of the NRM administration is different from the rest of the administrations that we've had before. That if they want to settle scores with their enemies, unfortunately, they don't do it in the open. They will visit that family and actually offer support if actually the information which is being given about that family is accurate. Now, if there are any families that probably up to now have not been compensated, that is a different story. And probably that can be addressed by the security, because I haven't been in touch with security for a very long time. I've been outside the country for about 6 months now. Now, because I was being referred to as a sadist, but I remember at the beginning of this conversation, I said that if there are any civilians that were caught up in the crossfire and either they lost lives or were maimed, that was unfortunate. And that qualifies me not to be a sadist. But politics is a very interesting game, because we call each other all sorts of names. But today, for me, I'm not going to call anybody names. Now, let's talk about the riotous situation that was actually creeping up in Kampala and the rest of the towns of the country. Because I had, I think, somebody mention that the police and the security forces were firing indiscriminately. Yes, of course. Just like in political parties, when we join political parties, you don't scrutinize so much about the extractions from where we come from. It's usually almost open entry in a political party. Now, it is also possible that some people actually recruited in these security forces without that much required scrutiny to find out whether this person actually has the background that qualifies that kind of person to actually be admitted into the security forces. And therefore, you find that actually, even within the security forces, there could be people who either or choose to do those kinds of things which are outside the law in order, what the Baganda call Okuvumaganya government. That is also a possibility. But the fact of the matter is, if there is a riotous situation, and they described how the riotous situation actually manifested itself in Kampala, and I want to repeat these things. What happened was that there was a rape, there was the formation of, the erection of illegal roadblocks. You had everybody who was found draped in yellow, and that is, of course, the color for the NRM, being tortured by goons on the streets in Kampala, and this torching of roads, or burning of tires, or both. And there was even the intention of burning political stations, and I want to repeat this. There was that intention, according to the intelligence reports. And there you are, and you expect that the security forces are not going to respond. They're definitely going to respond, because I'm not aware of a country where the security forces, even the riotous situation in London in 2008, 8 people got killed. The Yellow Vest movement in France, a number of people got killed as a result. Yeah. So whenever there is a riotous situation, let's not assume that these kinds of things happen only in Uganda. The moment you choose to be riotous, expect that there will be consequences. The only bit that probably is a terrible and undesirable is the fact that civilians are going to be caught in this melee. That is regrettable. That is something which is despicable and something that is condemnable. But the fact of the matter is that if some people are going to choose to become rioters, definitely the security forces are going to respond. And I want to give you an example. I don't know whether fellow panelists remember that policewoman who was hit by a hammer on the head, and nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about that police. She was just removing debris on the streets in Kampala. And one of these goons, I don't want to name names, but of course he must have come from one of the opposition political parties, came with a hammer and hit her on the head, and the woman went unconscious. And the rest is history. Of course, she was taken to hospital and so on, and she recovered eventually. Now, with those kinds, when you tempt, what happens to you if you touch the mouth of a snake? It will definitely bite you. You tempt the security forces by hitting one of them with a hammer on the head, and you expect the security forces not to respond most aggressively and disproportionately. I think you are definitely playing with fire. I want to regret the fact that civilians were caught in these things. And now I wish, and I want to buy into what my good brother Albert is talking about, that we should continue talking about these things. So that, because I am a fan of Fox News, which Albert probably you're not. Fox News, I listen to it. In fact, even before I came for this program, I was listening to Fox News. But what I see in the US, the shootings and the rest of the things which happen on the streets, in the communities and so on and so forth, is definitely despicable. And therefore, what do we do in these kinds of situations? I think discussion, as Albert is saying, is absolutely healthy. We continue talking about these things. We continue to exchange ideas. But the issue of picking up arms to fight the state will definitely respond. That one, there is no shortcut. They're definitely going to respond. The rest of the consequences that come as a result of the confrontation between the two, the Baganda say, there was a fight at the palace in Kasese, and the rest is history, because it is just a smoldering ruin as we speak now. So those who intend in the future to start armed rebellion, those who plan to become rioters, the consequences will be dire. Of course, everybody who is sane in their heads regrets the fact that in those kinds of situations, innocent civilians are caught in the middle. And they are either killed or maimed. And therefore, probably our security forces need to up the act and make sure that when they respond to those kinds of situations, they actually make sure that the lives of innocent people are protected. Now, I want to speak about the markets, because one of the panelists was talking about markets, how the security forces were shooting in them. Actually, another bit of the intelligence reports was that most of the people were actually erecting illegal roadblocks, undressing women, and so on and so forth, as I've said before in this conversation. Actually came from garages. This is now intelligence information. Anybody who wants to consume it, you consult a friend in the intelligence networks that we have in the country. We have quite a number of them. We're coming from garages. They were coming from markets. They were coming from really concentration, should I say, places where there was actually a lot of activity. And after doing these things, and whenever they saw security forces coming about, to actually stop them, they would run into the markets, run back to the places where they were, most especially garages. Wherever there was a garage, there was, should I call it a bonfire on the road and a roadblock, because the bonfire would always be accompanied by a roadblock. And all this information is floating all over the place and around, because the behavior of the riots that we've had in the country has always been the same. And therefore, the security forces actually predict almost most accurately to respond to these kinds of situations. Otherwise, the situation would have been, I was fortunate enough to be in Kampala during the times of those riots. And I saw what was happening. I saw what was happening. And in addition, I don't want to say that I am privy to some of the intelligence reports, but so be it. Because as an interested person and as an interested Ugandan, I must chance at some of these reports. I must be interested in what's happening in my country. And I must be part of that process that talks about these things the way we are doing at the moment. And I'm happy once again to say that Albert, my brother, is talking about us having more discussions about these things. So let's discuss these things. Let's dissuade our people from becoming rioters. Let's persuade our people not to be recruited into armed rebellion, because the consequences of those kinds of situations, the consequences of those kinds of steps, the consequences of those kinds of decisions will always be the same. Namely, there will be fighting, there will be probably death, which is unfortunate, and we don't want anybody to die, because all of us Ugandans are equal before the law, and we should also make sure that we preserve the lives of everybody. I want for the moment to stop there.
Right, thank you very much, Ambassador. We have about 20 minutes to the end of the show, but I want to get back to, yes, Albert, I see your hand up. Please make use also of the chat room. Albert, let me give you a minute so you can respond to. I don't know why your hand is up, but please, you have.
No. It was quickly to respond to the ambassador on saying let's make sure that our people are not traitors. So I noticed that at the beginning when we were talking about the Kasese situation, he labored very much to talk about the situation and the genesis of it and how the Era Republic and the genesis of the government versus Bakonzo conflict started. But when it came to the situation that we're in, the ambassador is not talking about the genesis of how these things come about. Yeah, there are riots in Kampala. Have you listened or have you tried to figure out why is the population up in arms? Why are young people unhappy with the government? Mostly young people. Why are they unhappy with the government? You should ask yourself that. So when you say let's dissuade our kids from going into rebel movements or going into confronting security, you should also, as a government official, also telling them, since you're a good consumer of their products, the intelligence products, it goes the other way. You cannot just be listening to them. Also talk to them. Why are they acting with this kind of impunity? Why are they behaving in the way that they are untouchables? These are the things that are brewing this kind of conflict. So it's disingenuous of the ambassador to talk about the situation in Kasese and give genesis of it, but only when it comes to the rioting in Kampala, he just starts there as if some people are so crazy that they just woke up one day and said, oh, let's go confront security forces on the streets of Kampala. It doesn't work that way. The people who are confronting the security forces, usually these are demonstrations that start peacefully, and the government escalates. The government forces escalate these security these demonstrations. So there is something, and for him as a senior government official and others who are listening, they should also look in the mirror and say, why are these people, why are these mostly young people unhappy with us? And if you don't address that and you say, oh, it's only on the other side where tell your people not to confront security. Well, I have news for the ambassador. It's not always that the government is always assured of winning these battles. We've seen countries where the population have overwhelmed security forces and taken over. So it could also work that way. Okay, so it's not the threat of saying, oh, you better tell your young people not to confront us or not to even ask for redress of their grievances. No, the officials and the ambassadors here and others are listening should also ask themselves, why are mostly young people in Uganda unhappy with the government? What is it that the government can do to diffuse these situations before they get to where they are? And then on the security, on the intelligence reports that he's hyped and who is consuming them and who is not consuming them, honestly, they're not that great. They're not that great, because most of the things that are happening, even the things that you are describing, if the intelligence was that good, some of those things would not have been happening. Okay, if you know that somebody has, these people are there, go pick them up from their homes. Why do you wait until they get to the market? If you know, then just pick them in the middle of the night. You're doing your drone. So I'm not that convinced that the intelligence is that great and somehow they know better. No, this should be a conversation, and you should ask yourselves, why are these people unhappy? You cannot disrupt their rallies. You cannot arrest their candidate and somehow you expect them, oh, we've arrested him, we think he's done something, you guys go to sleep. No, that's not how it works, and you know that. Ambassador knows that. So thank you so much.
All right, Albert, thank you for that. Before I can get back to Honorable Winnie, Kizza, Karim, you have your hand up. Karim, you have your hand up. What do you have to say? Yes, please.
I wanted to respond to the ambassador about his about the presidential, about how the government does its intelligence. It's quite unfortunate the way he presents it. I cited an example earlier when the Ugandan government, there were about 189 Al-Shabaab militants. I don't know what informed their intelligence to come up with such a number in this, interglobal connected world where people, I don't know whether they thought Ugandans won't know that this was fake news. I don't know how they came up with such a number. And when he says that there were multiple garages, when you see the people who were killed on November 18th and 19th, none of them was killed in a garage. We don't have it on any news platforms that in such and such a car garage, there were instances of rape, there were instances of, burning tires. He can cite examples because he looked as though he had a report in front of him to cite that in such and such a garage, there was a rape. A number of people were killed in such a garage. Even in a BBC report that we saw, there was now such a thing as people being raped. We don't have any victim of rape on November 18th and 19th that pursued legal processes to prosecute a person or one of members of National Unity Platform who was engaged in such acts. And I would categorically deny and say that there was no such a thing of rape sponsored by members of the National Unity Platform. For what? Why would the political party say start from raping women to do that? Those are things that are done by rebel movements like the NRA, like Resistance Army. This was a people's movement.
All right, Karim, thank you. I don't know if we have lost you or something, but thank you very much.
And pretend as if there was some intelligence that had been done prior to November 19th and 18th. It is quite, it's despicable. It's despicable. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Now, I want us as we wind up. Yes, we still, I can see there's still a lot of questions, a lot of unanswered questions, but we as the Diaspora Show, which we're looking to connect our communities, the diaspora community, and of course the Ugandans here. And the question that keeps coming up is that with all these injustices, with all these unanswered questions, how does all this affect, of course, the NRM's government relations with the diaspora community? How does this affect the economic development of the country? How can the diaspora, participate with all this happening back at home in development of the country? Winnie, Kizza, you have the floor. While you look at what the ambassadors talked about and what the other panelists have talked about, can you also have a look at how all this affects the economic development of the country?
Thank you so much, Lynn. And I want to thank my colleagues, members of the panel, including the ambassador, for really bringing out the real issues that are happening in our country. I know to our Ugandans in the diaspora, it's heartbreaking that you are working hard, trying to solve the unemployment question, trying to create a semblance of an answer to the unemployment question in our country and trying to contribute to the development and the construction of our country. and yet you see that little is being done. It's heartbreaking and it is frustrating. But I want to say that also the struggles you are involved in to highlight the injustices and unfairness that happens in your country is very, very much appreciated. It is back to us as people who are back home, and most especially those in leadership, that need to ask themselves, as our children in the diaspora have sleepless nights to work and bring money back home, what is it there for them to enjoy when they come back? Or what is it that is there for them to see their families enjoying? Those are some of the questions that we want to keep answering as people who are in the country. But when you have a regime that wants to do crimes with impunity, you have people who will treat others with high levels of arrogance, like we are seeing on this platform. Those who will think that whoever doesn't support me is regarded as a terrorist and an enemy, then you get a lot of frustrations, including those of us who are back home here. There is still a lot that we can do as a people. Let's keep talking. Sometimes there is healing that happens when people continue talking, including those that we don't agree with. Let's air out what kills us. Let's air out how we feel. And then maybe at some point we shall get a meeting point, because I see that many of the people in government speak a lot of falsehoods, including those that I thought would be understanding the situation and then be on top of the game. But they continue propagating the falsehoods and make them appear like they are real. You know, when we went into the elections of 2021, around 2020, the 2020 there, when we went for the nominations and of course the subsequent activities that happened of the campaigns, many of the opposition candidates to address rallies purporting that they are going to spread COVID-19. So COVID became an issue that was held against members of the opposition. I kept asking myself, is it only the members of the opposition that spread COVID? We are seeing the NRM supporters chanting and pouring themselves everywhere on the roads, others ferried in buses to come and listen to the NRM candidate. But there was no COVID issue arising. But when a few of the members of the opposition come on the roadsides to cheer their candidate, then intelligence information would come that they are now the bad ones. Those are some of the fundamental issues that we should keep asking ourselves. We have got an economic loss out of these insensitive incidences. You know, when the ambassador was talking about, yes, we are on top of the game in terms of security. Well, if you were on top of the game, the bombings wouldn't have happened at a police station, near Parliamentary Avenue and near Nakasero. They wouldn't. Shouldn't have happened if you were on top of the game in terms of security. If you were on top of the game in terms of intelligence information, you shouldn't have killed the many people you killed in November 18th. They wanted to show how excited they are about their candidate. They had nothing to do whatsoever. The ones who were killed had no relationship whatsoever. Those the ambassador is talking about of undressing people, waylaying, and doing the mayhem that he talked about. If you even went to the killings in Kasese, 4 policemen are killed, like he's saying, and that the killers ran into the palace. Albert put it clearly. This palace is not even on 2 acres. If the government of Uganda had sufficient information that some royal guards killed the policemen, the 4 policemen, and I'm sure these were not killed by the 150 people who died, they had all the available mechanisms within which they should have settled this thing. The only problem that we have, like I said from the beginning, is that any semblance of not being on President Museveni's side confirms you to be a rebel. So whoever did not want to show support to President Museveni had to pay by the way they paid. Those in Kasese, those in Kampala. I still even remember, because in 2000, President Museveni was not supported in Uganda during the elections. The killings of 2008 and 9, those ones were as a result of the Baganda saying no to President Museveni. So as much as we want to live in a better country, as much as we want to see development happening, our own government is retarding every progress that is made. Every little progress that is being made is being retarded. And I can tell you, we are sowing a bad seed to the young people, because now the young Ugandans know that you can only solve any crisis by fire. That is the message we are sending to them. I just wanted the ambassador to understand, you know, he was talking about the 80s and he was giving a genesis of the U.S.A. Republic, which I'm sure he has no clue about. In the 1980 rebellion of Museveni, when he was defeated in Luwero after he had killed the people and he was being pursued, he ran to Rwenzori. The people of Rwenzori kept him. The people of Rwenzori supported NRA. That is why we have now the program they refer to as the Rwenzori Luwero, because he knows he went and hid in the mountains of Rwenzori. The people of Rwenzori supported him. For heaven's sake, if they knew they were struggling for their own territory of the U.S.A. Republic, why would they have supported a foreigner? So they have been supporters of the NRM government. The ambassador knows that. The only problem is that they are realizing the government of NRM is not answering the needs of the people. And when they switch loyalty, they are in a problem. Now they become rebels of the U.S.A. Republic. You know, when we talk about the economic difficulties that the country finds itself in, when such things happen, I can just give you just a small example of what happened in 2016, when the people in Kasese were killed and others arrested. The ones who were arrested were over 200. And every month there was a court session. Every time there was a court session, around 200 people would come from Kasese. Every day there was a court session, around 200 people would come for a court session to see whether they can be allowed to stand bail for their people. And for anybody moving from Kasese to Jinja, the minimum they can spend is 150,000 shillings, Uganda shillings. That is the minimum. So calculate the 200 people coming every month to Jinja to stand surety for their people. And this is a poor community. So 30 million is taken from the community every month. 30 million is extorted from the community, from the poor people who are supposed to pay school fees for their children. And remember, these are relatives of some of the people who have already died, who would have been otherwise taking care of their families. So there was economic drain in the area. And to us, we are saying, going forward, you're going to see these communities looking even more devastated than they are looking now. So the economy, there is no way we can improve it when we are participating in draining it. The friends in the diaspora who were contributing heavily to building our economy, their remittances are reducing. Instead of answering this question to find out why the diaspora is no longer remitting the way they were remitting, we are looking at them as bad people, because majority of them were supporting Kyagulanyi, and therefore they must be hunted. They have no way of expressing themselves. Then you see the likes of Lumbuye being followed wherever they are. Everybody is in tension. So, Ambassador, let me tell you, peace is not necessarily the absence of war. Ugandans are not in peace. And I can tell you the repercussions of the war that is in Congo will be grave for us, the Ugandans. If I may tell you, if Uganda was using intelligence information again to go and attack Congo, if the intelligence information was true, they should have gone through the processes of seeking parliamentary approval, which they never did. I saw Uganda now signing some documents with Congo after they have already attacked. And I can tell you the area that was attacked as having said, no, you know, we attacked a real base of the ADF. But Talinga is a trading center. If you look at the pictures, you will even see border people, the border stage where they killed the people and the borders are there. And someone says, we rode into an ADF camp. We are going to what we came to discuss here. I will want to say that at some point we come back and discuss the security situation in the Great Lakes region. Then we can talk about Uganda's involvement in the security issues on the Great Lakes region. But as for now, I want to say our country is not in peace and is not at peace. Ugandans are hurting, Ugandans are dying, and our leaders need to explain the levels of intolerance, the levels of arrogance, the killing of government institutions. Because when the president went to Kasese, if he was really in command like the ambassador was, as he believed, the army commander wouldn't have been in denial. When we called Katumba Wamala, he told us, no, Myai was not consulted on the issue of Kasese, which means the issue was personal to Museveni to kill the Bakonzo people, just like it was personal for him to kill the Baganda people. So let's not meander about the bush. Let's not create situations that will appear to look like people were rioters, and we are even commissioned to go and tell being rioters. Let Museveni leave. The Ugandans will stop rioting. Leave us in peace. We get a transition that is peaceful, so that we forget our dirty past. That can be one of the issues. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Honorable Winnie. Kizza, people, ladies and gentlemen, we've run out of time, but I want to give each one of you a minute to give your concluding remarks. I'll start with you, Miriam. Concluding remarks, and then we see how do we move forward? No accountability, no justice, and we move on like that as a country. I don't get it. How do we even sleep at night?
Yeah, how do we move forward as a country? Your last question, Ms. Lynn, was about how does the diaspora work with such a government to ensure development, to foster growth and improve the relations. So far, there is animosity between the diaspora community and Uganda, because like we talked last time, opposition, the majority of opposition are in the, it's like majority of opposition are very active in diaspora. And that's for a reason, like Honorable Winnie Kizza said, Ugandans are at home at peace. If you are a civil society organization and you criticize the government or the human rights record of the government, then you are persecuted, like we saw the Chapter 4 Human Rights NGO headed by Nicholas Opio and so many others which have been closed once in a while. And if you are an opposition leader, it's a big sacrifice to be an opposition in Kampala, to be an opposition leader in Uganda, because you don't know who is gonna knock on your door the following day. That's why it seems as if the diaspora community is the opposition of Uganda, because for them, they have freedom even to voice their opinions. So what's the way forward? You even highlighted that, you even mentioned that there is a human rights group of lawyers who are taking the government to court about the November killings. But what will happen? We have so many cases which have been taken in Human Rights Court, Human Rights Commission, where the government security operatives have been found guilty of persecuting, torturing civilians, and most of the cases, they go scot-free. Can we see Kyomugasho? The ambassador said that they are belligerent officers in UPDF, people who have shady backgrounds, and they could be criminals within the security forces. Can we see them prosecuted in Kyomugasho? Can we see them taken to court? If there is a killer in uniform, take him to court and remove him from the army. What is he doing in the army? Why is the government covering up for such a killers if they are criminals in the security forces? So the issue is, how do we move forward? Without a good political environment, you cannot even, we were talking investment here last time, how we can promote investment. Mr. Ambassador, how can we promote investment with such a bad image back at home? How can we assure an investor that there is going to be political sustainability and political, a predictable political environment when we have never even experienced a transfer of power? Do we know how Museveni is going to leave the government, for crying out loud? We can never have peaceful elections. Whoever opposes Museveni is an enemy of the government, like Honorable Winnie Kizza said. So how can we see that a peaceful transfer of power in such environment? How can we have free and fair elections? How can we promote democracy? How can we assure our investors that Uganda is a stable country, is going to be stable in the next 20 years? Are we about to see mayhem like we see in West African countries? How is UPDF, which is above the law today, going to conduct itself if Museveni loses elections? So those are the issues. And as Ugandans, whether you are in NRM, whether you are in opposition, these issues concern all of us. This is our country, and we can't let it go in fire because today we are eating and you have peace. Like Honorable Winnie said, absence of war is not peace. If you are not peace, if you are not sure about tomorrow, then that is insecurity, and it should also be handled. Thank you so much.
Right, Miriam, thank you. Quickly, Albert, concluding remarks, then Karim as well. We shall conclude with the ambassador.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you, fellow panelists. Again, like I said, this is very important that we keep these conversations going, but they have to be substantial. We cannot just be, we cannot just be talking and talking and talking. And
Albert,
talking.
are you there? Oh, okay.
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. So for some of us who have this connection, these connections, and these some powers like the ambassador does, and we can talk. We better start talking to the people who actually can have effected some of these changes. You can talk to the people in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You can talk to these security people that give you, and we do talk. Okay. We do talk. For some of us who have relatives who are and friends who are in UPDF, sometimes we do talk to them and then task them. Say, what is this that you're doing? We cannot just say, oh, take and carry this government line of saying, okay, if we have done it, well, those who died in the crossfire, that's unfortunate. If we have done it, we must have had a good reason to do it. That can't be the line. How do we move forward? We engage each other, we engage those in power, and we try to create an image that presents our country and ourselves in the best of light. And also, we really put down foundations that respect human lives, that respect the constitutional process. So these are some of the institutions, as Honorable Winnie Kizza was talking about. The constitutions are important. Let's put these things in place, and we hand over a country to the next generation, a country that they can be proud of, a country that actually keeps going. Other than, if we don't do that, this thing can be running right now, but it's going to fall apart. The center will not hold forever if we keep on the track that we're on. At some point, we'll look at this and say, okay, we missed an opportunity and it will be too late. So how do we move forward? We keep these conversations going, but substantially, not just covering over. Thank you so much.
Oh, all right, thank you. Karim, are you there? Quickly in 1 minute.
Yes, thank you so much. I think one of the takeaways from this deliberation is the ambassadors admitted that the government works with some rogue elements within the security forces. Some of the evidence. Oh, you said you recruit, and you don't know.
I was very clear. I said there could be wrong elements.
I gave you time. I gave you
Please
time.
mark your English. Mark your English.
I gave you time. I gave you time.
Your English.
I gave you
Correct
time.
your English. Yes.
This is the rogue. Can I conclude? The rogue behavior of the NRM and its representatives. You have seen it with the ambassador. I will give an example. During the Kaihura time, they recruited unconstitutional, what do they call them? Unconstitutional crime preventers. Those tend to be rogues. You have seen those elements. They killed a national boxer, Mando, with his people that they had recruited to take care of national inter-platform campaigners. And after killing him, Museveni comes up and says, I know who killed Mando. Museveni comes to admit, I know who killed Kasese. He comes and admits, I know who killed Susan Magara. Those are the rogue elements within the ANRM that this ambassador is one way saying he admits to their elements of that. And on the other hand, running away from that. It's quite unfortunate. Last, I will talk about the diaspora. I think we have the opportunity. We have the opportunity of bas tukakulali na netudda na bilinda. I don't know, they threw us to the dogs, but now we are coming up strong. You have seen so many young people who have moved to the diaspora, our brothers and sisters who are working in unbearable conditions in the Gulf of the Middle East. Those are the strong supporters of a transitional government because they want to come back home. Some of them are well educated, but they are working, and they are jobs that they wouldn't do back home. But because they need to put food on the tables of their families, they are going through that. And we hope that this diaspora will hold fort. It is going to be the backbone of the transition of governance in Uganda. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Karim. Ambassador, over to you. We have 1 minute to go.
Sure. I just want to say that I think in the future, when we are quoting ourselves, let's be accurate rather than pushing things which aren't down the throats of ourselves. That definitely doesn't serve the purpose of these discussions. Let's be accurate when we are quoting each other. You don't push words into the throats of the others. Now, the second one, which I want to mention very quickly, is that because I had one of the panelists talking about Museveni, wanting Museveni to go, well, the constitutional pathway for him to go is actually to go through elections. If they are problematic, let's discuss about that. I know that, of course, quite a number of people are going to say that the election or the electoral processes in the country are still having issues. Just like in the U.S., I mean, everybody, I told you I watch Fox News here and CNN almost every day. They still have issues with the elections. The other day, Trump was saying that the elections were rigged. So this is just something that always, so elections is the pathway in as far as removing a president, because we have come a long way. The elections now in the country are regular and predictable. Every 5 years, whoever wants goes and participates in those elections. So elections, if Museveni must go, yes, he has to go through the electoral process. Anything outside that would definitely be unconstitutional. Secondly, because somebody hinted on NGOs, I don't want to name names, leaders of some NGOs whose money was impounded, and of course, the leaders of those NGOs, I think, were arrested. You see, this is it again takes me what happens in the US, because the US, especially after the elections of 2016, accused quite a number of people in the US political establishment, accused Russia of influencing the outcome of the elections of 2016. Now, monies, again, it goes back to the intelligence reports, which many people don't want to listen to. Monies were actually going through NGOs to go and influence the outcome of elections of 2021. And that's why the government actually arrested some of these people, and actually many accounts were blocked in the accounts because money was actually passing through those avenues. And therefore, the government couldn't sit idly by when these kinds of things were happening. Lastly, because somebody was talking, I think, about the UPDF, that they are, of course, as I said before, even during the course of the conversation, that there could be rogues within the UPDF. Actually, it's not there could be. They are there. But what I know is that those who have been caught on the wrong side of the law have actually been arraigned before the court martial, and they've been sentenced, as far as I know. If there are some who haven't, that's a totally different matter. When Kayura, for instance, was caught in the middle of quite a number of things that were unconstitutional, he himself, actually, as a general, was taken to the court martial. The rest is history. As far as the conclusion of that case, fine. Let's wait, give it time, and then see where it ends. Now, when it comes to the diaspora, of course, we have them in the UAE here. We have over 100,000 diaspora members. And how happy am I to say that every year they send to Uganda over $200 million. I think that's a plus to the economy. And they're doing a good job. Of course, many of them are doing odd jobs and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is they are very instrumental. And therefore, as a mission here, one of our jobs is to make sure that we mobilize the diaspora, because it is a very strong as far as developing our country. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, panelists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all your submissions. I hope the next time we call on you, you will be here as well. Thank you for sparing time. I want to thank you, all of you, and wish you a lovely weekend. We'll catch you again next time.